Okay, so my name is Daniel Menz. I'll be going through this quite quickly because we have a lot to cover. And I'll be talking about the foundation for self-governance, how we can peacefully remove ourselves from the quote-unquote legal system, if you will, or the matrix as some people call it. And today, all information presented is provided for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute legal, financial, or tax advice. Okay? So I don't know who can do the slide next. Oh, you do. We are trying to set up the podcast so it's a bit more public, so we're on more platforms. But the reason we keep it public is because we share a lot of information in there that is not necessarily for public consumption, if you will. We talk a lot about these private remedies, and many of them I'll be getting into in more detail. But check us out, Liberties Horizon. So we're basically a PMA. Who's familiar with the term PMA? Okay, so only 2 people. Wow. Okay, so PMA 3. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. PMA stands for Private Membership Association. Think of it like a private club. Okay, all these elites, they have their private clubs, so no one knows what's going on in there. Okay, well, we can do the same thing. Okay, and the government doesn't have any right to go in there and tell us what to do. And then sacredhonoref.com. This is our educational online community where we actually teach our members how we can remove ourselves from the matrix, how we can live freer lives without the constraints of the public trade and commerce. I'll be talking about those in a bit. So the foundation for self-governance, this is really what we are presenting here today, or what we're trying to encapsulate in a very short amount of time. But the question is, why are our rights being abused or ignored by those who are in power so often? Why are those in power trying to ignore our rights or just do whatever they want, right? Okay, well, let's get into it. Next slide. Because it's actually very simple. Little do we know that invisible contracts ensnare us everywhere. Invisible contracts is basically the small print, the terms and conditions, okay? Who actually reads small print when you sign up for a new service? Okay, we got 1. All right, very nice. But, right, no one reads small print. Well, guess what? There's small print everywhere. There's contracts everywhere. You can't do anything in this society without signing stuff all the time, right? You have to show your ID, you have to prove your identity, and then you have to sign stuff. Well, these are all contracts. Everything is commercial. Everything is a contract where you essentially give up your rights in order to receive some kind of benefit. And if you don't know how to navigate contracts, well, then you end up being ensnared in these contracts and lose your rights all day long. Contracts and commerce. We are living in a society where everything is based on contracts, okay? You can't do anything unless you sign a contract. Best example is the driver's license, okay? That's an invisible contract because on the driver's license application, they don't tell you that you are consenting to the thousands and thousands of statutes and codes and regulations as it relates to traffic. You're even consenting to that the police can legally steal your car, impound it, and can imprison you. You're consenting to that every time you sign a driver's license application. So that's why they have that power. That didn't used to be like that, okay? Driver's licenses actually, they were at first voluntary, back in the day, but then they made it mandatory. Well, it's still optional, really, so let's get into it. Public versus private, okay? We talk, you hear a lot on the media, like public companies and private companies. What we're talking about is really private. So I talked about, these private clubs. So when these billionaires go into their private clubs, no one knows what's going in there. No media is allowed, no government is allowed, right? They have their private clubs, they have their private islands, they have private jets, they have private estates. Everything they do is private and it's untouchable. Why is that? Because they understand how the system works, okay? But just because they understand it doesn't mean that we can't understand it. Okay, all the things that these elites use, these billionaires use, we can use the same things. Because these loopholes are open for everyone if you know where to look and if you know how to use them. And then the private society, this is really what's sort of emerging right now. A lot more people are waking up to the fact that we can live our life differently. We don't have to engage in these public, governmental, commercial contracts anymore. We can live a life that's more private, more sovereign, more free, outside of the reach of all the statutes, codes, and regulations that the government imposes on everything you want to do. All right. Okay. So next slide, please. So this is basically what we're naming the movement into self-governance. Okay. So in essence, we are living in a dual system. United States versus United States of America. Who has ever heard that before? So you can look this up in Title 28, United States Code, Section 3002, subparagraph 15. And on the next slide I actually have that listed. It's kind of hard to see, but you can look this up for yourself. So on the next slide, we're going to see the definition, 28 U.S.C. 3002-15. This is the legal definition for the word United States. 15, United States means a federal corporation. It's not a country. Next one, an agency, department, commission, board, or other entity of the United States. Or C, an instrumentality of the United States. Do you see country in here? Do you see nation in here? No, you don't. It's a corporation. United States is a corporation, and that happened in 1871 with the Organic Act. We'll talk about that also in a minute. So here it is. This is just a screenshot. It's very hard to see, but this is from Cornell Law. Okay, you can see 28 U.S. Code, paragraph 3002. You scroll down to 15, and you see it with your own eyes. The United States means a federal corporation. We have been living inside a corporation that's basically putting contracts in front of our face to do whatever we want to do in life. You can't do anything without these contracts, right? So we're constantly engaging in these contracts every single day. So here it is in Burton's Legal Thesaurus. This is like the standard big legal thesaurus. When you want to look up legal terms, you go to the Legal Thesaurus. And it defines the word citizen with several things. We'll talk about that too. But one of the synonyms for citizen is inmate. When have you ever heard that before? The word citizen is synonymous with the word inmate. So when they ask you, are you a citizen of the United States? They're really asking you, are you an inmate of the federal corporation? Interesting, huh? So now, just thinking, how many times have you said yes to that question in your life? Every single time they asked you, right? Well, you didn't know there was another choice because they hid that choice from you. So this is Burton's Legal Thesaurus, and you can see it for yourself, citizen, and then inmate right there. Maybe that's why they treat us like we don't have rights, perhaps? Okay, well, if we tell them every day that we're inmates of the federal corporation, why would they assume anything else? So a dual system. We have at least 2 constitutions, probably 4, but it's hard to verify some of this stuff. We have at least 2. The Organic Original Constitution for the United States of America, which was ratified in 1789, which was governed basically, it was a form based on natural law. Okay, we've heard natural law before, yes? Okay, cool. All right, natural law. Versus the corporate drafts, or rather redrafts, during the Reconstruction period after the Civil War. And that is when this corporate fiction overlay was imposed on all the states. All the states are now sub-corporations of the United States, or the federal government, or the federal corporation, okay? So capital S state of whatever, the name California, Nevada, whatever, capital S state means a sub-corporation of DC, and this is how they managed to overlay federal jurisdiction over all the states, which wasn't that way before the Civil War, right? All the states were sort of semi-sovereign, and they would navigate and govern themselves. So here it is in 28 U.S. Code. Again, they're telling us that we're in a dual system. This is for unsworn declarations. So if you have to sign something or put like a declaration of like an oath on it, okay, I declare under penalty of perjury. So if you need to do anything like that, you have 2 options. One of them says, and you can't see it, but that's why I recommend you look this up for yourself so you see it with your own eyes. One says without the United States, and one says within the United States. One sentence has the actual name United States of America in there, and the other one doesn't. So by default, the jurat, this is really what it's called, a jurat, a penalty of perjury, on every single contract, when you have that penalty of perjury, and it doesn't actually explicitly say under the laws of the United States of America, you are entering that contract with the federal corporation, and this is where it is, right? So you can actually change that if you want. You can actually scribble in, and we've done this, you can scribble in the words United States of America when you see that penalty of perjury, and then you can sign it. So now you're actually engaging this contract in the country and no longer in the federal corporation. So this is just a little gold nugget here for you. So the 14th Amendment, that's really a deep, deep well, but in a nutshell, it was ratified under duress, blackmail, and coercion, so technically it's not even legitimate. It was this basically established federal citizenship and singular federal jurisdiction. It changed we the people to legal persons or commercial persons, thus creating a contract. The 14th Amendment is a contract. When they ask you, are you a citizen of the United States? You're contracting into it. Then the 13th Amendment, yes, it outlawed slavery and it outlawed involuntary servitude, but it made voluntary servitude legal by omission. Legal by omission, you can ask any lawyer, they know exactly what this means. When you hide something and not explicitly say it outright on the document or on whatever paper, it's legal by omission. It's legal because you're not mentioning it. So same with the driver's license. It's legal by omission for them not to attach these thousands of codes and regulations for traffic because you can look them up yourself. But it's legal by omission that they don't have to attach them to the application. And you're consenting to it still. And then I talked about the Organic Act of 1871, where Washington, D.C. was turned into a federal corporation. We're still dealing with that today. So I did 2 major articles on the 8 legal landmines on the 14th Amendment, and you can find these articles on my Substack, As a Man Awaketh on Substack, and I also did a recent video on that. You do not need a real ID. You do not need a real ID. And if you have one and you don't want it, you can opt out of that too. Okay? It's a scam. You don't need a real ID. You can just use your passport or passport card, actually, which is even more, it's actually the better ID. Let's talk about the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Who has heard about that? Federal Reserve Act? Okay, we have a few students here from the fellowship, so that they know what's up. So the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 established the Federal Reserve, okay? Our central bank. That's so loving to us. So I want to point out something here real quick. So on every Federal Reserve note, you see 2 seals. One is from the Federal Reserve, and the other one is from the U.S. Treasury. Both the Commissioner and the Secretary of the Treasury also signs it. Well, if you go to 12 U.S.C. 411, you're going to see definitions for lawful money versus federal credit or Federal Reserve notes, as it's now known. So every time you use a dollar, or rather a Federal Reserve note, you have the option to either use it as lawful money, which is under the Treasury, or you have the option to use it as federal credit. Well, federal credit is taxable. Federal Reserve notes are taxable. Lawful money isn't. Lawful money is not taxable. They're telling you that in their own codes. And you can even endorse checks. When you get a check and you do the endorsement on the back, don't just put your signature. Then you're just depositing it as private credit. There's a certain way you can endorse a check where you actually deposit it as lawful money, that it's not taxable. This is also what the billionaires do, by the way. Okay, so this is the Emergency Banking Act, 1933. We're still under it. When they took away our gold and pledged the U.S. citizen persons as collateral for the new currency known as the Federal Reserve note. This is the executive order, and they say here, as you can see, all persons, there's that word again, all persons are required to deliver their gold to a nearby Federal Reserve Bank. Well, they don't say people. They're not dictating this to people. What they're telling you, okay, so all federal persons, all legal fiction persons have to deliver their gold to the Federal Reserve. But because back then, Americans didn't know this kind of stuff, so I guess we all consented. And you can look this up again under House Joint Resolution 192. It was promulgated then in Public Law 73-10, and then that followed by the Social Security Act, the birth certificate bonds, the alphabet soup agencies, statutes, codes, regulations, mandates, etc., etc. Because there were no agencies before 1933. Look it up. The government was actually quite small. But after 1933, everything changed, because that's when the international banking cartel put this country, or rather this government, into bankruptcy. So we know that there's these trillions and trillions of debt, right? That the government owes. Well, no one talks about who this debt is owed to. Who is it owed to? Huh? It's the Federal Reserve. And who owns the Federal Reserve? Huh? The international banks, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and all those lovely people. So that's who we owe the debt to. And your tax money, by the way, doesn't go into roads and buildings and all that stuff. We had roads and buildings and infrastructure before there was an income tax. How do we do it? Right? All your income tax is going to pay off the interest of the debt. Okay, so that's just a little tip. And if you want to look more into this, The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. This is an excellent book, a must-read if you want to get into this stuff. And then on the next slide is another book that we recommend, which is Fruit from a Poisonous Tree. Yeah, from Melvin Stamper. He really goes into depth of like step by step how they did this over several decades. They knew exactly what they were doing. And so yeah, Fruit from a Poisonous Tree, very good book. So the key takeaway today, if you take nothing away, please, this is what it is. With every injury to our rights, every time they injure our rights, they have to give us a remedy in law in order to stay clean with natural law, really, to keep it simple. They have to give us an opt-out, or they have to give us a plausible deniability, okay? So here's a little list that I made, corporate fiction versus natural law. So a US citizen, as we know, is the corporate fiction. Or the natural law equivalent then, the opt-out would be a national. Who has heard of the national? Okay, cool, we've got a few. So that's a status correction that you can make. It's pretty simple, where you basically go back to pre-Civil War state citizen, because that was the only legal, lawful political status that Americans had. Wasn't taxed, okay? It's a very easy way to get out of income tax, by the way. So, but there's a whole lot of benefits. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So, corporate fiction, we have S corps and C corps and LLCs. When you want to do a business, right, you have to ask the government to have permission to open a business. The natural law equivalent to that is a private express trust, with which you can do banking completely tax exempt in the private. This is what the billionaires do. Corporate fiction, real estate versus a land patent. The land patent was the way by which we can actually grant, by which it's the original title or the original deed, right? Today we have warranty deeds. Well, if you actually read the fine print on your warranty deed, it basically says that, well, you're a tenant of the state of wherever you are. Your property tax is actually rent money to the state and to the county. Then corporate fiction, lawyers, charges like legal charges against you and debt, and the natural law equivalent for that is equity jurisprudence. It's its own law form. I'll talk about that in a minute. So, for example, the remedy for stealing our gold in 1933 is discharge. Again, you can look this up in HJR 192. We can literally discharge, dollar for dollar, all debts, all loans, all legal charges against our name and more. Yes, it's possible. We're doing it every day. Why? Because your signature on whichever contract you're signing actually creates the money. So when you open up a credit card, they're not actually lending you money. They're using your signature to tap into your birth certificate bond and extending that credit back to you plus interest. All right? So, and again, the Federal Reserve tells us this in their own book called Modern Money Mechanics, was published by the Federal Reserve of Chicago. Anyway, so discharge is an equity practice, and equity is mentioned over 500 times in Black's Law Dictionary, if you want to look it up, okay? So now this is where our pathways come in. This is what we do in the Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship. So the 4 pathways, these are the foundations for self-governance. So we have the national status and passport, we have the trifecta pathway, we have equity passage, and then allodial land. So all of these pathways stand on their own and are wonderful, wonderful remedies that you can use. But when you combine them all together, you become the most free man or woman that you could possibly be in this land. Okay, so let's go into it each a little bit. First one, we have the national status and passport, and this is sort of my forte. So you can it's a very simple, straightforward, do-it-yourself process. You basically correct your political status from a federal corporate U.S. citizen to a pre-Civil War state citizen, which is now called a national. They just came up with a new label to confuse you. You're going to get a do not detain code on your passport book and your passport card. How do we know this? Because we have lots of videos of nationals getting pulled over and giving their passport card, and then the police lets them go. You can safely volunteer out of personal income tax, both federal and state. And you can opt out of small legal nuisances like jury duty or parking or traffic tickets and stuff like that. You can protect your kids from CPS, for example, okay, and much, much more. So next we have the trifecta. So this is where how you can put your business into the private, okay? This is the most comprehensive asset protection with a 3-in-1 powerhouse of lawful structures. So the first one is a free and private church ministry, in the likes of a 508c1a. Who has heard of the 508? There's a lot of, it's a buzzword going around. So 508, it's not a 501, okay? So the 508 is actually an exception to the 501. So you can set up your own private church ministry. Then that ministry opens a private foreign common law express trust with a tax-exempt EIN. Again, this is what the billionaires use. And then you can create your private member associations, or PMAs, or we like to call them really a private club. But really, in essence, they're just an extension of the church, okay? And this is like, for example, this would be a beautiful example of how we could run this all under the private umbrella of a church and in a PMA, okay? So this is how you navigate your personal and private business affairs outside of the public corporate, federal corporation business. They have no jurisdiction. They can't tell you what to do. So equity passage, this is the oldest law form known to mankind. It even predates common law, and it's an honorable remedy for any friction you have with the legal system. Okay, I don't care what they throw at you with equity jurisprudence. With the equity passage, you can discharge it. Okay, you can discharge debt, legal, commercial charges, financial charges, all with the power of your signature. There's no need for costly attorneys or arguments or any kind of conflict. Equity brings peace to any situation because we're actually making everyone whole in the process. You can develop the art of inquiry to influence the lawful outcomes that you want to happen in your circumstance. Okay, equity jurisprudence has proven successful in discharging credit card debt, loans, mortgages, you name it, property tax, all of it. Anything that has a financial number to it can be discharged. All legal charges, no matter what it is, okay? Now, there's a process, not a silver bullet, but so all this takes education and fortitude. So, and last but not least, we have a Lodia land or land patent, and this is the highest title you can get to any piece of land. And it's when you have that title, it cannot be stolen, it cannot be leaned against, it cannot be sold, it can only be granted, okay? The government can't take it away from you, so to speak. You can execute, this process has been perfected over the last 50 years. It's streamlined, it's tested, it's effective. And every project is different depending on where you are, but over the last 50 years, we've really perfected it. You're going to receive the rights back to your land. You don't need to apply for mineral rights or water rights or whatever the case may be. All the rights that are in your land are automatically restored to you and all the powers that come with it, okay? And this is the power that you realize that this is how land was granted or gifted. This is all based on even founding, treaties. Okay, so these are land treaties so that the people of the Americas could claim. So we're literally going back in time and pulling these treaties forward and claiming them and stepping into them as stewards of the land, all right? And then, with that comes standing, and the Supreme Court, every time this land patent was challenged in the past 50 years, the Supreme Court has always upheld the land patent, okay? That's how powerful this is. So you're going to stand on precedent, on Supreme Court precedent, many, many times. Okay, so are you ready to build your foundation for self-governance? Are you ready? All right, so thank you so much. So let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to be upstairs in the clinic room, okay? I'll be here all night. Stop by and say hi. And then one last time, these are our websites, libertieshorizon.com and then Sacred Honor EF. Thank you very much.